Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making scroll saw castles. Now, scroll saw castles are a fun little project that are great for the beginner. They're great for kids to make, and one of the reasons that they're so wonderful is that you can make them from any stock and you don't need a pattern. You don't need any skill. You don't need to follow any lines. You just cut. Where the secret is to scroll saw castles is in the angle of the blade. So let's head over to the bench and we'll talk a little bit about that before we start in on our project. So the way that scroll saw castles work is that you cut a shape in whatever size block you want of wood, and you cut it on an angle, whether it be 2 degrees, 1 degree, 4 degree, 5 degree, it doesn't matter, whatever angle you choose. But depending on the angle, that will allow it to protrude either more or less. In general, the thicker the piece that you're cutting, the more shallow or the closest to 90 degrees you want to cut. And let me show you what I mean by that. The angle on all of these is cut so that the cutout has the widest part of its cut at the base of our block. So this way, when it's pushed up through, it will wedge and stop it from going any further. So on this center core piece, I cut this one at 2 degrees. And if I push it up, there we go, you can see how much that protrudes. Now this one here at 3 degrees, which is quite a bit more when you're talking about castles, if we push that one up, you can see that protrudes quite a bit less than what the one at 2 degrees. But the outer circle that I've cut was actually cut using a 1 degree angle on the scroll saw blade, and that protrudes much, much further. I can almost protrude it right out if I push it and really jam it on the wood, but that's not necessary. So you can see here where the angle of your blade plays a very big part in how far or how tall your castle will extend out. And you can get some really interesting effects just by changing the angle of your blade to a little less or a little more. So there is no pattern for this project, but what we're going to use for this is I've got this maple burl. Now this was given to me years and years ago. And what I'm going to do is we're going to take this over to the scroll saw. I'm going to drill a blade entry hole somewhere in this burl. I don't know exactly where. And I'm going to place my table tilt at approximately 2 degrees. And we're going to cut around the perimeter here, just doing loose, free-form shapes. All right, and once you get to the end of your cut, you just want to make sure that you've actually separated this, and then you can remove your blade out of your piece, and we'll see what kind of a angle we ended up with. So there we go. We ended up raising that just a little tiny bit, and that's perfect. That's what we want. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is we're going to pop this core out of here, and we will now do the exact same thing here. I'm going to leave the blade angle the same, and we'll cut around the perimeter of here, just kind of give it another extra little angle and see how we do. Now, when you drill your blade entry holes, you can drill them straight down through. Once you start up your saw, if you have a firm grip on your piece, once you start it up, the kerf of your blade will actually fix that hole up so that it's actually gone to your 2 degrees or whatever it is you're cutting at. But let me get a hole drilled in here and we'll cut the next level. So with the hole drilled, we can place our scroll saw blade down through it. It can be a little finicky to get it through just because of the angle of the blade versus the straight 90 degrees of the hole. So there we go, and we'll tighten that up, hold it down firmly, and just run your saw for a second or two to straighten out that hole. Done. Simple as that. So let's get this cut around the perimeter, and we'll go from there. Okay, so let's head over to the bench and see what we've got here so far. So with those two cuts made, if we just push them up now, like that, and this one here, because the angles are a little further out at 2 degrees, these pieces don't protrude as much, but you can see that we're starting to get like a hill there around the perimeter. Now, our next cuts, because they're in a much thicker wood, remember the thicker that you go, the closer you want to be to 90 degrees. So I'm going to set the blade to 1 degree, and we are going to cut the core of our castle. Okay, and with that one cut, we will now repeat the process in the middle sections. And you can see there how that now protrudes up through there. So I'm going to continue cutting this, and when I get it done, I'll show you what we've got. And you end up with something that looks like this. However, when we put all of our pieces back together and we push them up from the bottom, let me just show you what you end up with. So we push these up just like that, and this, and this, look at that. And then finally, the last piece. You end up with this really cool looking kind of wooden castle. Now, we're not done with this by any means. Let me point out something. If you accidentally go too sharp or too shallow on your angles and your piece pulls right out, like what I did here, don't worry about it. We can glue it in afterwards. So it's no big deal. This is what makes this project so wonderful. It's available to all skill levels, and if you make a mistake, it doesn't really matter because you can fix it. Also, if for some reason you don't like the way that one of your pieces protrudes or doesn't protrude enough, let's say, you can fine-tune that as well. You can change the angle of your scroll saw and take it over and kind of cut around the bottom perimeter and trim it up and shave it up until you get it to come up that little bit extra that you want. Just be careful that you don't go too far, otherwise you'll end up with a piece that doesn't fit right and doesn't look right. So we're not done here by any means. And for the next step, we're going to be doing just a little bit of wood burning. Well, the last thing that we want to do here is add some accents, like some windows on our castle. So I have my wood burner with just a writing tip on it, and we will just add a few little burnt accents in here. You don't need a lot, and they don't have to be overly huge. So you can add these little windows all the way around your castle, and when you're done, I'll show you what you should have. And when you're done, you should have something that looks like this. Doesn't that look great? Check that out. All right, so at this point in time now, I'm going to give this a coat of Danish oil just to bring out some of the different colors in the maple burl, and we can chalk this one up to being done. And there you have it. Scroll saw castles. Guys, could you get a project that is more simple or more easy than this? Probably not. I mean, it's pretty difficult to mess this up, even if you mess it up. I cut the angle too shallow. I had it too close from my very top peak, and it pushed right through. So a little dab of glue fixed it up. It's not even something that you have to worry about. Practice on some similarly thick stock. Get the angles, see how far you want it to push out, see how it works. The thinner the stock, the bigger the angle has to be, otherwise it's going to push right through. There's not enough material left to hold it. So remember, the thicker the piece, the more shallow the angle, the more close to 90 degrees. The thinner the piece, the further away from 90 degrees you want to be. And as long as you keep that in mind and do some practice cuts and have some fun with it, what do you got to lose? It's a wonderful project. Now, you don't have to use a burl. I used it because I had one sitting in my shop. It's been there for years. It's just a tiny little piece. I think you saw me use it years ago, part of it anyway, for a turned beaded ornament that my wife had made. But other than that, this piece has been sitting around forever, so why not turn it into something fun? Wood in your shop is great, and you have those pieces that you like to hang on to for that special project, but I'm going to tell you something. If it's sitting in your shop and it sits there for years and years and years and never gets used, then it's really no good to anybody. So there's plenty of wood in the world, guys. If you have that special piece, use it. Have some fun with it. That's what the shop is all about. And this project just screams for a burl or that special little piece of wood. So Try different sizes, different shapes. Cut the base out of a square piece of stock and make it all kind of woogity around the edges. Do what you have to do, but really, give this one a try because they're whimsical, they look great, and honestly, they're kind of fun to kind of blow away an hour sort of thing. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. I've been wanting to do this one for a while, and for some reason I just haven't gotten around to it. And then I've had requests for more scroll saw videos, and I thought, great time to make a scroll saw castle. And that's where today's show came from. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click that bell and then you won't miss notifications of future episodes of the show. I hope that you enjoyed today's content, guys. They're a lot of fun. I hope that you're going to try this one for yourself. And more importantly, I honestly hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.